If you've ever had that uneasy feeling in your gut that something's just not right, like when you show up somewhere familiar but everything feels off like a bad dream you can't shake, then you're going to understand exactly where I'm coming from. Because the day I went to pick up my niece, I walked into a house that was completely empty. No furniture. No signs of life. Just silence and dust. It was like stepping into a ghost story, except this was real and I had no idea what had happened. If you stick with me through this video, you're going to find out the truth behind why her house was abandoned, what secrets I uncovered, and how it turned my whole world upside down. So don't click away, because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you thought you knew about family, trust, and the places we call home. I want you to imagine this with me. You're driving down a quiet suburban street, a place you've been to dozens of times before. It's familiar, comfortable, the kind of neighborhood where neighbors wave as you pass and kids play outside until dusk. But this time something feels different. The air feels heavier. The trees, the houses, even the sky seem to hold their breath. You pull up to your niece's house, expecting the usual noise, maybe her laughter or the sound of the TV, but there's nothing. Not even a car in the driveway. You walk up to the door and it's wide open. The house looks like it's been left in a hurry, but there's no one there. Nothing. And you realize this is not just about a missing person anymore. It's about a mystery that's pulling you in deeper with every heartbeat. I've shared stories before. Stories about strange things that happen in families, unexplained moments that seem small until you realize they're signs pointing to something much bigger. But this one hits different. Because it's personal. My niece, who I love like my own child, suddenly vanished from a place that should have been her safe space. And when I found her house empty, it wasn't just a matter of concern. It was a shock that sent me spiraling into questions I didn't have answers for. What happened to her? Why was the house left like a shell with no trace of life? And who, if anyone, wanted her to disappear without a trace? I want you to think about how you'd feel if this happened to someone you cared about. The helplessness, the fear, the burning need to know the truth. That's exactly where I was when I stood on that porch, staring inside, wondering if my next step would lead me closer to finding her, or deeper into a nightmare. And trust me, the more I dug, the stranger it got. Strange phone calls, unexplained messages, people who didn't want me asking questions. This wasn't just about a missing girl. It was about secrets buried under years of silence and lies. And as I share this with you, I want you to keep your mind open and your heart ready, because what's coming next will shock you in ways you never expected. Right now, you're probably wondering if the police got involved or if this was some kind of prank or maybe something supernatural. I promise I'll get to all of that. But first, I want to take you through every moment, every detail that led me from a simple errand to pick up my niece to uncovering a mystery that could have been ripped straight from a thriller movie script. You'll hear about the people I met, the clues I found, and the things that didn't add up, things that pointed to a truth far more complicated and heartbreaking than I ever imagined. And here's the thing. I'm not just telling you this story to scare you or entertain you. I'm sharing it because I know some of you have been through your own mysteries, families torn apart, loved ones gone missing, secrets that haunt your dreams. Maybe you're watching this right now because you're searching for answers too. And maybe, just maybe, my story will help you feel less alone in that search. So, wherever you're watching from, know that I'm speaking to you directly. Stick with me till the end, because the answers you came here for are coming. And what I found might just change everything you think you know about family and home. Before I tell you what happened after I found that empty house, I have to introduce you to a few key people. There's my niece, Emma, a bright, funny, sometimes stubborn girl who's always been the light of our family. Then there's her mom, my sister, someone I trusted with everything, but whose recent behavior had me worried for months before this all happened. And there's a few neighbors and friends who knew more than they let on, people whose stories didn't quite match the version I was being told. Each of them plays a part in this puzzle, and understanding their roles is going to be important as we peel back the layers of what really happened. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How can a house just be abandoned without anyone noticing? How can a girl just vanish? Those are the exact questions I kept asking myself over and over. The truth is, sometimes the most ordinary places hide the darkest secrets. And sometimes the people closest to us aren't who they seem to be. You're going to see that unfold here, piece by piece. And while some parts will be painful to share, I want to be honest with you because that's what this story deserves. Raw truth, no sugarcoating. As you watch, pay attention to the little things. The strange phone messages I found, the details about Emma's last days that didn't make sense, the way neighbors looked at me like they knew something but wouldn't say it. These clues aren't random. They're breadcrumbs leading to a revelation that changed everything. I'm not exaggerating when I say this story will take you on an emotional roller coaster, from hope to fear, from confusion to shock. But more than that, It's about what family means when trust breaks down and you have to find the truth on your own. So if you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever wished for answers in the dark, then stay right here. I'm going to take you on this journey step by step, sharing everything I saw, heard, and felt. By the time this video ends, you'll understand why that empty, abandoned house was only the beginning of something much bigger. And you might find yourself asking questions about your own family and the secrets you thought were buried. When I think back to those weeks leading up to that day, it all feels like a blur, like I was sleepwalking through moments that, in hindsight, were screaming for my attention. I'd been juggling work and family responsibilities, trying to keep everything together, but there was this growing knot of worry gnawing at me, mostly about Emma and my sister. Emma was always bright and cheerful, but lately she'd started acting differently on the few calls I managed to catch, quieter, almost withdrawn. And my sister, well, she was distant too, like she was carrying a weight she didn't want anyone else to see. It wasn't like her at all, and when you notice that kind of change in people you trust, your mind can't help but race to the worst possibilities. I remember texting Emma more, asking if everything was okay, but her replies were short and sometimes delayed, as if she was avoiding something or someone. Then there were those vague conversations my sister had on the phone, hushed and tense, where I could only catch bits and pieces, names I didn't recognize, mentions of money, and a tone that didn't sound like the calm, responsible woman I knew. At first, I told myself not to read too much into it, maybe it was just stress or something minor, but deep down, I knew something was off. The day I decided to go pick Emma up was supposed to be simple. A quick visit, a little normalcy in the chaos, but that's when everything took a turn I never saw coming. I can't shake the feeling that I missed signs, small clues hidden in everyday moments that I brushed aside because I didn't want to believe something was wrong. Like the day Emma mentioned a new friend she met at school, someone she said was cool but kind of secretive. She laughed it off when I asked more, but I could tell she wasn't telling me the whole truth. Or how my sister suddenly stopped answering my calls for days, and when she did pick up, her voice sounded strained, like she was scared. It wasn't until I got to Emma's house that everything started to make sense in the most unsettling way. There were traces of recent life, a half-empty glass on the kitchen table, a book left open, but no Emma, no family, and not a single explanation. I searched the rooms over and over, each step heavier than the last. That's when I noticed it. Subtle things out of place, like the faint smell of smoke in a room that shouldn't have had any, or the faint marks on the door frame that looked like someone had tried to hide something behind the wallpaper. It was like the house itself was holding its breath, hiding secrets in plain sight. As I dug deeper, talking to neighbors and friends, I kept hitting dead ends, or worse, getting answers that raised more questions. One neighbor told me they hadn't seen Emma or her family in weeks, but when I asked why, the answer was vague and nervous. Another said my sister had been arguing with someone on the phone right before they all disappeared, but no one knew who it was. Even Emma's so-called secretive friend was nowhere to be found, and attempts to contact people connected to my sister were met with silence or strange evasions. It felt like a web tightening around me, with every person I spoke to offering a piece of the puzzle that didn't quite fit, and every clue pulling me into a darker corner of the story. I began to wonder if this was something bigger than a family dispute or a missing person case, like a tangled mess of debts, threats, or something even more dangerous. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the strange messages I found on Emma's phone when I managed to get access. Some were odd, cryptic phrases that didn't make sense, pictures taken in shadows, and one that simply said, "Don't trust anyone." Was Emma trying to warn me? Was she scared of someone she knew? The more I tried to piece together the timeline, the more I realized there were people in her life who had motives I couldn't understand yet. Maybe someone wanted her gone, or maybe my sister had reasons for disappearing that she kept hidden even from those closest to her. There were moments when I questioned if I was chasing ghosts, the fear playing tricks on me, but then I'd find another detail that pushed me forward, fueling a desperate need to uncover the truth no matter how painful it might be. And here's something that still haunts me. The night before I went to pick up Emma, I got a strange call on my phone. The number was blocked, and the voice on the other end was distorted, almost mechanical. All they said was, "Stop looking. Some doors are better left closed." At first, I thought it was a prank or a wrong number, but after everything I found, I'm not so sure. Who was that? And why would they want me to back off? It only made me more determined to find answers, but also scared me in ways I didn't want to admit. Because sometimes the truth isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Just when I thought I was starting to put the pieces together, the road suddenly became a lot more tangled. The first real blow came when I found a box in Emma's bedroom, a small worn-out shoebox tucked away under her bed. Inside were letters, photographs, and a notebook filled with entries that hinted at something going on beneath the surface. It was like a secret diary, capturing moments of fear, confusion, and coded messages that only made sense when I looked back at everything I'd uncovered. But before I could dive into it fully, the box vanished. I came back a few hours later and it was gone. The bed was made as if no one had been in the room, and that shoebox had disappeared without a trace. At first, I thought maybe I misplaced it or that I'd imagined putting it there, but no one else had been in the house. Who would want to take that box and why? The idea that someone was watching me, following my every step, suddenly wasn't just paranoia. It was real and it was terrifying. Not long after, I got another warning, this time in person. A man I'd never seen before approached me when I was at a local cafe, the same place I'd been piecing together timelines and trying to talk to neighbors. His eyes were sharp and his voice was low but firm as he said, "Stop digging. It's not safe for you. Some things are better left alone." When I asked who he was or what he meant, he just vanished into the crowd like a ghost. The chill from that encounter stayed with me, the kind of feeling that crawls down your spine and refuses to leave. It made me question if I was getting too close to something powerful, something dangerous. But it also made me more stubborn. The harder they tried to shut me down, the more I wanted to find the truth, not just for Emma but for everyone who had been caught up in whatever mess this was. Around the same time, I uncovered something about my sister's past that I never expected. A secret she had buried deep, hidden from family and friends alike. It wasn't just a small mistake or a forgotten chapter. It was a betrayal that explained a lot of the strange behaviors I'd seen recently. Years ago, she had been involved in a financial scandal at her previous job, something that cost people a lot of money and trust. She'd managed to keep it quiet, but apparently, some people hadn't forgotten or forgiven. That shadow from her past now seemed like a possible motive. Was someone trying to hurt her or her family as payback? Or was she trying to hide from something worse, dragging Emma into it unintentionally? The more I learned, the less clear everything became, and suddenly, every friendly face around me felt like it might be hiding an agenda. Then there was Alex, a close family friend who had always been a rock for us. Or so I thought. He was one of the first people I told about Emma's disappearance, and he offered to help in ways no one else did. But as the days went by, small things about him started to feel off. He seemed too eager to steer me away from certain questions, and there were moments when his stories didn't add up. When I tried to get more details about what my sister was dealing with, he'd change the subject or tell me to focus on something else. I wanted to believe he was on our side, but a nagging doubt started to grow inside me. Was he protecting us or protecting himself? Sometimes, the people closest to us have the most to hide, and trusting them blindly can be the biggest mistake of all. Everything was becoming a web of secrets, half-truths, and unseen dangers. Every step forward was met with resistance, and every answer seemed to open up new questions. The line between friend and foe blurred, and the weight of uncertainty pressed down harder with each passing day. I found myself caught between the desperate need to uncover what really happened and the growing fear that doing so might put me and those I care about in harm's way. It felt like the walls were closing in, and the deeper I went, the less certain I was about who to trust, or if the truth was something I was even prepared to face. Just when I thought I might be hitting a dead end, a final twist dropped in that turned everything upside down. I got a message on my phone. No number, no name, just a photo of Emma. But it wasn't recent, it was taken years ago. And written across the bottom, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "I'm not who you think I am." That message was a puzzle I wasn't ready to solve yet, but it told me one thing for sure. This story was far from over, and the real truth was buried deeper than anyone had imagined. What did it mean? Who sent it? And how did it change everything I thought I knew about Emma and my family? Those questions are what I'm still trying to answer, and what you'll have to stay tuned to find out next. Because this is no ordinary missing person story. This is something much darker, and it's only just beginning. Just as I was trying to process the cryptic message on my phone, something equally unsettling happened that pulled another person close to me into this swirling storm of confusion and fear. My cousin Mark, someone I'd always considered level-headed and reliable, received a similar message, though his was even more ominous. It came in the form of a letter slipped under his door late at night, no return address, just a few typed words that sent chills through his entire family. "You don't know the half of it. Stop asking questions before it's too late." Mark had been helping me quietly from the sidelines, trying to gather information, connect with people who might know what was really happening. But that letter shook him in a way I hadn't expected, and it added an entirely new layer to this mystery that we hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Emma or my sister, it was about everyone connected to them and maybe even beyond. The feeling that someone was watching, controlling, and warning us away only grew stronger. At the same time, A new piece of evidence surfaced that completely contradicted what I'd been told about the day Emma disappeared. According to the police report, she had left the house early in the morning, alone and unaccompanied. But a surveillance video from a nearby gas station told a different story, one where Emma was seen getting into a car with an unknown man, a figure who hadn't come up in any of the witness statements or conversations I'd had. Who was this man? What was his connection to Emma or my sister? Why had no one mentioned him? That video flipped the narrative on its head, making me question every assumption I'd made up to that point. It meant there were people actively hiding information, manipulating what the police and the public believed, and possibly even lying to me directly. It made me wonder if the danger was far closer than I thought, and if the trust I'd placed in those around me was completely misplaced. And that's when the real paranoia started creeping in. Every call, every message, every casual conversation took on a new weight. Was this person trying to help, or were they just another piece in a larger, more sinister game? Even my closest friends and family began to feel like suspects. It was impossible to tell who was genuinely concerned and who might be covering something up. I found myself retracing every conversation, every look, searching for signs I'd missed. The very people I turned to for support started acting strangely, vague responses, sudden silence, unexplained absences, all making the gap between what was said and what was true widen into a chasm. The line between ally and adversary blurred until I wasn't sure if anyone could be trusted at all. As if that wasn't enough, I started hearing whispers about a secret that had been buried years ago, something connected not just to my sister's past, but to a whole network of people who had stakes in keeping it hidden. There were rumors about a lost inheritance, shady business deals gone wrong, and old grudges that had festered in silence. Some of these stories made their way to me through people who preferred to stay anonymous, and while I couldn't verify the facts, the consistency of the whispers added a new urgency to the investigation. What if Emma's disappearance was tied to something much bigger? A fight over power, money, or revenge? And what if the warning messages were just the surface of a much deeper, darker threat aimed at silencing us all? Every day that passed felt like walking a tightrope stretched over a pit of unknowns. The more I searched, the more tangled the web became, and the harder it was to know where to turn. With Mark also pulled into the crossfire, the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about one missing girl anymore. It was about protecting the people I loved from a shadowy force that seemed to be tightening its grip. And with new clues that contradicted everything I thought I knew, I realized the answers I was chasing might come at a cost I wasn't prepared for. What secrets were still hidden behind closed doors? Who was pulling the strings from the shadows? And how much of the truth would I be able to handle before it all fell apart? The only thing I knew for sure was that this story was far from over, and that the next chapter might change everything forever. Every night since those chilling messages arrived, I felt a weight pressing down on my chest that I couldn't shake. It started with small things, shadows lingering too long outside my window, footsteps behind me when I was alone, my phone lighting up with unknown numbers and silent calls. I told myself it was just nerves, that maybe I was imagining things because my mind was stretched too thin, desperate for answers in a mess that didn't make sense. But then the unthinkable happened. One evening as I pulled into my driveway after a long day of chasing leads and digging through files, I noticed a car parked across the street that hadn't been there before. It was dark, unmarked, and the windows were tinted so heavily I couldn't see who was inside. My heart pounded as I watched it stay there, engine running even as I hurried inside. That's when I realized, this wasn't coincidence or a random stranger. I was being followed. The safe bubble of my everyday life had shattered, replaced by a constant, suffocating sense of danger that clung to me like a second skin. The next morning the stakes grew even higher. Mark, who had been my anchor through all this, suddenly vanished without a trace. One minute he was answering texts and offering to meet, the next his phone went straight to voicemail, and his apartment was eerily silent when I stopped by. His friends hadn't heard from him in days and no one seemed to know where he had gone. That disappearance hit me like a punch to the gut. If someone was targeting Mark, someone close to me, then there was no safe place left. It wasn't just about Emma or my sister anymore, it was about survival. Fear started to settle into my bones in a way I hadn't felt before. A raw, primal alertness that made every creak in the house sound like footsteps closing in, every unexpected knock a potential threat. In those dark, sleepless hours, my mind raced with questions I didn't have answers to. Who wanted to silence us? Why was this happening now, after all these years? And most terrifying of all, was I next? The paranoia grew like wildfire. I found myself checking locks obsessively, looking over my shoulder in every public place, and second-guessing every person I encountered. Even those I trusted felt like they might have hidden motives. I kept replaying conversations, searching for a clue I might have missed. A slip of the tongue, a flicker of fear in someone's eyes that could betray their true intentions. My relationships, once a source of comfort, began to feel like potential traps, and the line between friend and foe blurred until I wasn't sure if anyone was truly on my side. Then came the direct threat, a message left on my doorstep in the dead of night, scrawled in shaky handwriting on a torn piece of paper: "Stop digging or lose everything." The words cut through the silence of my home like a knife. It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. Suddenly, the abstract danger I'd been sensing became tangible, pressing in on me with urgent, suffocating force. The mystery I'd been chasing had turned into a trap, and I was the prey. The chilling realization was that I couldn't back down, not without risking everything, including the people I cared about most. But moving forward meant stepping deeper into darkness, where every step might bring me closer to answers or to ruin. As the walls closed in and the shadows lengthened, all I knew was that the truth was out there, tangled in lies and threats, waiting for me to uncover it, but at what cost? And with no clear path to safety, I was left alone with my fear, my doubts, and a question that haunted every moment: how deep did this nightmare really go? As I sat in the quiet of my living room, the weight of all that had happened pressing down on me like an unrelenting storm, a knock at the door shattered the uneasy calm. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at this hour, and my heart jumped into my throat as I moved cautiously toward the door, every instinct screaming that this could be yet another trap. When I opened it, there stood Alex, the family friend whose loyalty I had quietly begun to question but hadn't yet confronted. His eyes were intense, almost desperate, and there was a strange mixture of relief and urgency in his voice when he said, "I have to tell you something. Something you need to hear before it's too late." My mind reeled as I invited him inside, unsure whether I was walking into a revelation or another betrayal. What he revealed that night didn't just flip the story on its head, it shattered everything I thought I knew. Alex confessed that the whole mystery wasn't what it seemed at all. Emma's disappearance, the abandoned house, the warnings, they were part of something much bigger, something orchestrated from the shadows long before I ever stepped into this nightmare. He explained that my sister's past wasn't just a matter of financial scandal or old grudges, but that she had been involved in a covert operation, one that blurred the lines between right and wrong, legality and danger. According to Alex, she had been working with a group involved in exposing powerful figures, people with influence that reached far beyond what anyone in our circle could imagine. The messages, the threats, the disappearances, they were all connected to this secret, a silent war fought behind closed doors with consequences far deadlier than I had ever feared. But the most shocking part was what Alex said about me, that I had unknowingly become a key piece in this intricate puzzle. He hinted that my search for the truth was being manipulated, that someone had used my determination and trust against me, pulling strings I couldn't even see. The idea that I was not just a victim but a pawn sent chills through me. Was Emma's message, "I'm not who you think I am," a warning about me? Had I been blinded by my own love and desperation to see the bigger picture? And who was really pulling the strings? Someone close to me or a faceless enemy lurking in the background? Everything I'd believed about friends, family, and the danger we faced suddenly felt like a carefully constructed illusion. The faces I had trusted might be masks, and the truth I chased might be a labyrinth designed to keep me running in circles. Alex's words raised more questions than answers, but they opened my eyes to the possibility that this story was far from the simple missing person case I'd thought it was. It was a complex web of secrets, betrayals, and hidden agendas, and the deeper I dug, the more I realized that the person I needed to watch out for the most might be someone I never suspected. As the room seemed to close in around me, I knew one thing for sure: nothing about this mystery was as it seemed, and the next steps I took could change everything, or end it all. The moment Alex's words hung heavy in the air, I knew I was standing at a crossroads that no one ever prepares you for, the kind where every path feels like it leads to loss, pain, or worse. It wasn't just about uncovering a secret anymore, it was about deciding what I was willing to risk to find the truth and who I was willing to lose in the process. The line between protector and destroyer blurred, and the people I loved became both my motivation and my biggest vulnerability. I found myself facing a choice so brutal it felt like my whole world was tilting on its axis. Confront my sister about her hidden life and risk shattering the fragile trust left between us, or walk away and live with the gnawing pain of not knowing what really happened to Emma, and what dangers still lurked in the shadows. Every time I imagined asking her the hard questions, I could see the fear in her eyes, the walls she'd built to keep us both safe. But if those walls came crashing down, what would be left? Could our family survive the truth? Then came the ultimatum, A chilling message delivered not through text or letter but a face-to-face encounter that I hadn't expected and couldn't ignore. A stranger appeared with a cold warning that cut through every ounce of hope I clung to: stop digging or everything I cared about would be torn apart. They didn't need to spell out the consequences. The threat was clear in their eyes and in the tremor of their voice. It was a brutal reminder that the truth had a price I might not be willing or able to pay. Suddenly, the stakes were no longer abstract fears but urgent, personal dangers that demanded impossible decisions. Should I protect my own safety and retreat into the silence of unanswered questions, or push forward into the unknown, risking everything, my family, my peace, maybe even my life, for a truth that might shatter us all? The emotional weight of that choice pressed down on me like a relentless storm. It wasn't just about solving a mystery anymore, it was about confronting my own fears, my deepest loyalties, and the dark truths buried beneath the surface of everything I thought I knew. I felt torn between love and suspicion, between hope and despair, and the harder I fought for answers, the more the lines blurred between friend and foe, truth and deception. Every conversation became a test of trust, every glance a question I couldn't answer. I was trapped in a web of secrets where pulling one thread risked unraveling everything I held dear. And through it all, the question that haunted me most wasn't who was behind the disappearance or the threats. It was whether I could survive the cost of the truth once it finally came to light. The choice wasn't just about finding Emma or uncovering secrets. It was about deciding what kind of person I wanted to be when the dust settled, and whether the people I loved would still be by my side when the nightmare was over. As the pressure mounted and the shadows grew darker, I realized that this was more than a mystery. It was a test of everything I believed in, and there was no guarantee I'd pass. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous, and with each heartbeat, the impossible choice loomed larger, threatening to consume everything I had left. The moment the pieces started falling into place, the scale of what I was up against slammed into me like a freight train. This wasn't some isolated family tragedy or a simple disappearance. It was the tip of a massive, tangled conspiracy that reached far beyond anything I had imagined. The shadows weren't just lurking in the quiet streets of my neighborhood or the secrets of my sister's past. They stretched into powerful circles where influence and fear held people hostage. The quiet warnings, the vanished friends, the veiled threats, it was all part of a larger game, one where innocent lives were pawns and silence was the currency. Suddenly, the stakes skyrocketed, and I realized this wasn't just about Emma or my sister anymore. This was a fight against forces that could crush anyone who dared to challenge them, and I was right in the middle of it. And then the betrayal hit me where it hurt most. Alex, the one person I thought I could rely on, wasn't the ally I believed him to be. The cracks in his stories, the way he dodged my questions, they weren't just signs of uncertainty or fear, they were the masks of deception. I discovered he had been feeding information to those behind the threats all along, acting as a double agent in a dangerous game of manipulation. It was like the ground beneath me shifted and I was left standing alone on a crumbling cliff, wondering how I could have been so blind. The man who had sat across from me, warning me of danger and urging caution, was working against me, playing a part in the web that ensnared my family. His betrayal wasn't just a personal blow, it was a terrifying confirmation of how deep and dark this conspiracy ran. The pace of events accelerated in a way that left me breathless. Every lead I chased brought me closer to people who were willing to silence me permanently if I got too close to the truth. Phone calls went unanswered, meetings were canceled at the last minute, and shadowy figures began appearing in places I once thought safe. My own home didn't feel like a refuge anymore, it was a cage with invisible bars. I could hear whispers in the background of conversations, catch glimpses of hurried phone calls, and feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking my every move. The fear wasn't just in the threats or the unknown enemies, it was in the betrayal, the erosion of trust, and the crushing realization that I was completely isolated. Yet, amid the chaos and fear, something fierce ignited inside me, a determination that no amount of danger or deception could extinguish. This wasn't just about finding Emma or exposing a secret anymore, it was about reclaiming control of my life, protecting those I loved, and breaking the silence that allowed these dark forces to thrive. But the question that haunted me with every step was this: how much more could I endure before the conspiracy swallowed me whole? With the truth inching closer but the danger escalating faster than I could handle, the path ahead was a razor's edge between salvation and destruction. And with every heartbeat pounding louder, I knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The fight was on, and the final chapters were coming faster than anyone expected. The night I finally confronted the truth felt like the world had narrowed into a single, suffocating moment where everything I'd feared and hoped for collided in a storm of raw emotion and cold reality. I had traced the final lead to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place whispered about in hushed tones by those who knew the darker corners of the city. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl and every breath feel shallow. As I stepped inside, the dim light flickered above, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts on cracked concrete walls. I wasn't sure what awaited me, whether I was walking into a trap or finally standing face to face with the person behind the nightmare, but I knew this was the moment where everything would either fall apart or come together. My heart pounded in my chest, every nerve screaming for me to turn back, but I pushed forward because I owed Emma and my family the truth, no matter how devastating it was. Then from the shadows a figure emerged, calm, composed, but with eyes that burned with a coldness I hadn't seen before. Was my sister. The woman I had spent sleepless nights worrying about, the one whose secrets had pulled me into this labyrinth of danger and deception. She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resolve, and for a moment, all the anger, fear, and confusion I'd felt melted into a desperate need to understand. She confessed that everything I had uncovered was true, but that she had no choice but to be involved in the dangerous game we'd been dragged into. Her past, the covert operation, the betrayals, they were all part of an effort to protect us, to keep us one step ahead of forces that wanted to destroy not just our family but anyone who dared to expose the truth. Emma's disappearance wasn't a simple case of someone running away or being taken. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to shield her from the very people who were hunting us down. Hearing this shattered and strengthened me at the same time, revealing the painful sacrifices hidden beneath layers of silence. But just as relief started to creep in, a sudden noise shattered the fragile moment. A door slamming open, footsteps pounding against the concrete, and the unmistakable presence of armed men closing in fast. The final battle wasn't just emotional, it was a fight for survival. Heart racing, I grabbed my sister's hand and we darted through narrow corridors, dodging shadows and echoing threats. Every step was a fight against time, every breath a gamble between life and death. We reached a dead end, and for a fleeting second, it felt like the nightmare had caught us. Then in the chaos, Emma appeared, alive, hidden away but safe, her eyes wide with fear and hope. The reunion was raw and overwhelming, a mix of relief and sorrow that cut through the terror. But just when I thought the nightmare was over, the biggest twist of all came crashing down. As the armed men closed in, Emma whispered something that chilled me to the bone. "I'm not the only one they're after. They know about you." The look in her eyes told me that the danger was far from over, that this conspiracy had layers I hadn't even begun to uncover. And in that moment, as the walls closed in and the fight for our lives surged forward, I realized the truth was bigger, darker, and more terrifying than anything I could have imagined, and the story was far from finished. In the quiet aftermath of that night, when the adrenaline finally began to fade and the dust settled on the chaos that had consumed our lives, I found myself standing at a crossroads between relief and lingering uncertainty. Emma was safe, hidden away, protected by layers of sacrifice and secrets that had once seemed unbearable but now felt like the fragile shield guarding what little peace we had left. My sister, battered by the weight of her choices but stronger than I ever imagined, stood beside me, and for the first time in months, we shared a silence filled not with fear, but with the tentative hope of healing. The conspiracy that had threatened to unravel everything wasn't completely destroyed. Powerful forces still whispered in the shadows, and the scars of betrayal ran deep. But in that moment, I understood that truth wasn't always about closure. Sometimes it was about survival, resilience, and the courage to keep moving forward despite the unknown. I had uncovered secrets that changed how I saw my family, my community, and myself. Truths that would haunt me, yes, but also strengthen me in ways I hadn't expected. Even as life tried to return to some semblance of normal, the past lingered like a shadow at the edge of every decision. Trust, once shattered, required rebuilding brick by brick, and the faces of those who had deceived me remained etched in my memory, reminders that the line between friend and foe is often blurred. Yet there was also an undeniable bond forged through shared pain and survival, a bond that no secret or betrayal could erase. The warnings, the threats, and the mysteries left unanswered served as a reminder that darkness often hides beneath the surface of the most ordinary places, and that vigilance is a price we pay for those we love. As I looked at Emma and my sister, I realized that the story we'd lived through was not just a tale of disappearance and danger, it was a testament to the strength of family, the complexity of truth, and the resilience of the human spirit when faced with unimaginable trials. But just as I allowed myself to believe we might finally be free from the shadows, a new message arrived. Simple and signed but impossible to ignore. It read, "This is only the beginning." Those 4 words carried with them the weight of an unknown future, a lingering mystery that promised the fight was far from over. It was a reminder that while some chapters close, others open wide, inviting us to question what we think we know and to prepare for the unexpected. As I held that message in my hands, the weight of the journey pressed upon me once more, but this time tempered by a quiet determination to face whatever lay ahead. The story had changed me, forever altered my world, and as I shared this with you, I hope it leaves you reflecting on the fragile line between truth and deception, the power of courage in the face of fear, and the endless depth of mysteries waiting just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. Because sometimes the most compelling stories aren't the ones with neat endings, but the ones that leave us wondering, questioning, and yearning for more long after the final scene fades away.